Hi everyone, my name is Erin Elizabeth Wamberg. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with me today. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you're new here. Today we are talking about, is going through a hard time mean I'm going backwards? And like always, the short answer is no, but I'll explain it a little bit through the video. But yes, of course not, going through a hard time. A lot of times our ego can make us feel like we're going backwards or we're doing something wrong, or any of these stories that are coming up for you. It's very common for the ego to take something where it seems like we're going backwards, um, but we're not. Okay, that's the short answer. First thing I want to say about this is no one and nothing outside of you can take away any healing or any work that you've done on yourself already. So, nothing, no matter, if everything in physical reality gets taken away from you, or you have a big shakeup in your life, or something happens that was really unexpected, nothing that can be taken away from you can actually take away from who you are in your soul and from like any actual work you've been doing for yourself. So that's the first thing to note, is that if you've put in hours and hours and years maybe of work on yourself, of connecting to yourself, feeling connected to yourself, of like showing up for yourself, deepening your relationship with yourself, nothing outside of you can take that away. So you can never undo your healing. It might feel like it sometimes, and that's very real, and we want to honor that, but nothing can actually be taken away from you that you've done and the time and effort you've put into yourself and your process of becoming more healthy, whole, and sound, of unlearning toxic patterns. None of that can ever be taken away from you. And so when we're going through a hard time, it could be a lesson that you feel like you already learned, or it could be, something brand new that you didn't think you were going to be dealing with, or you didn't even know you had to deal with. And that's part of the human experience on earth, actually, is that there's never an end point to our healing. And I don't, don't get triggered. That's not like, it's not horrible news. It just means that we have an infinite universe inside of us. And so the deeper we go, the more and more and more we can always connect to, we can release, we can remove, we can restore, we have unlimited ways that we can grow and expand in the human experience of being on earth. And so because of that, if you feel like, okay, I thought, when I first went into healing, I thought I was going to focus on this particular thing. Or when I first focused on my relationship with myself, I was going to focus on this and this and this thing. And you did all that and you worked through it and it's great. But the good news is, even if you're not unlearning trauma or unlearning things that happened that were very messed up to us, we can still grow. We can still expand. And anytime we want to grow or expand out of our comfort zone, that's going to feel uncomfortable because our ego likes what's familiar, even if it's not serving us anymore. So even if something hasn't served us in a really long time, even if it's like we can feel it's not good for us, we can feel it's not in our best interest, but we can keep wanting to create it because it's familiar to us. And so the good news is, if you are having a hard time or something is coming up that you have to deal with, the good news is that means you are not stagnant. That means you're not complacent. That means you're growing in some way, shape, or form if you're uncomfortable. You may not like to hear that, but that's the truth. So the good news is there will be an other side to it, and you will get through it to the other side. But because we're on earth, and because the reality of being a human on earth is that we do have unlimited ability to grow and change and to move into something else, that we do need to understand that when we are going through a hard time, it's not to punish us. It's the ego wants to be like, healing is like this, and growth is like this. It's just a line, like this isn't this, right? But you can think about anything in your life that you've accomplished, probably wasn't as straight of a line as you thought it was going to be, right? There were probably some things came up, some roadblocks came up. You had to turn back around. You had to go a different way. You had to look at something again that you thought you already dealt with. That, whatever. And so a lot of times healing, it can seem like we're moving this way, but we need to go back, or we need to circle around, or we need to look at it in a different way we didn't think about. And so when that happens, we have to remember to be kind to ourselves. And we have to remember that we have to trust our body wisdom of what's coming up for us to release to be able to move forward. And so we need to not feel shame or judgment for ourselves, right? Just accepting and allowing what's coming up for us is very important. And knowing that when we do allow that, then that's going to guide us onto the path of moving forward. And you can think about it, a video game is a very, very good example for many spiritual laws of how to understand Earth. But for today's video, what we are talking about is, in a video game, after you beat one level, you get to the next level and then it's a little bit harder, right? You have some of your same tools, but maybe, in the other one you had to jump over one thing, this one you have to jump over two, or, whatever. And so we have to look at, like, there's always new level, new devil is also the saying, possibly, if you've heard that before. And knowing that anytime we are growing, we're becoming a bigger, better, expanded version of ourselves, or just even a more connected to source part of ourselves. When that happens, we have to challenge something that we haven't challenged before. And it could be, you have this deep wound and you're like, I already worked on this. Maybe you worked on level 1 of the wound, but now this is level 2 of the wound, right? And that's, again, annoying, but that's what it is. So you have to think about, in a video game, when we get to the next level and when we do have to work through the next thing, it's usually not just, okay, yeah, I can use the exact same tools as before. I can do the exact same thing. Maybe you can, but you have to refine them a little bit, or you have to be a little more precise, or, you can't just float by like you did on that last time. You have to get a little more, skillful in what you're doing. And so when we go through a hard time, it's not punishment, and it doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean that your healing or your process from before doesn't count. It just means that you are looking at something more intense. You're on the next level of your life that is going to ask you to be the next version of yourself. And so, again, the ego sometimes doesn't like to hear this, but sometimes we have to loop around back into our lessons. Sometimes we have to learn something again. The saying, it's the same lesson over and over until you learn it. And sometimes there's some lessons that we have to learn our whole lives, just in different ways. And there's some lessons, okay, got it once, I'm done, I don't need to look at that again. And it just depends. Like, you don't have to judge yourself, you just have to trust yourself that what comes up you can move through. And remembering that any adjustment period, any uncomfortable, any hard time, that means you're growing in some way, shape, or form, right? When things are very easy and very routine and you don't even have to think, that's when you're not being challenged, and that's when you're not growing. And again, if you are a conscious being on earth and you want to grow and change, you're going to have to go through hard times. It's just, again, part of being on earth. And part of that means, you have to understand that when you're growing and changing, it's like, if you want something you never had, you have to do something you've never done. And so if you're trying to heal something in yourself, if you're trying to release something within yourself, you're going to have to find a new way of being. It might not be even that you change something in physical reality. It could just be that you change something internally, and then that radiates outward. But going through a hard time just means you're digging a little bit deeper within yourself. You're spending more time within the soul of yourself. You're getting more clear about who you are and the ways that you need to show up for yourself, and you can show up for yourself, and you can move into these next layers and levels of, I'm ready to go to this next thing in my life. I'm ready to challenge myself or expand in this way. Even if you don't feel ready, right? Sometimes we're presented with challenges or scenarios in life, and the universe, God, spirit is just like, okay, let's go. Like, time to move forward, time to check it out. And so it's up to you to decide that if you want to beat yourself up when you're doing this process, being like, oh my God, I thought I healed this. I can't believe I have to go through this again. I already learned this. I don't want to learn it anymore, right? So it's up to you to decide whether you are going to judge yourself for having a hard time, or if you're just going to be like, okay, this is a hard time. It means I'm growing. I trust myself. I know I can move through it. Because when we have a hard time, it doesn't mean that you need to use it as ammunition against yourself. It doesn't mean you're bad or stupid. It doesn't mean you didn't learn your lesson. It doesn't mean that you're not, this person you think you are who can heal and grow and change. It just means that when we're going through a hard time, doesn't mean you're going backwards. Sometimes we have to loop back around again. Sometimes we have to relearn the lesson again. It just means that you are growing, and anytime there's growth, it can be challenging. It will be challenging. You're going to have to look at the stories, the patterns, the thoughts that you've been carrying up to this point, and then sometimes they just don't work anymore. And the good news is, when they don't work, that means it's time for something else to come in, so you can move forward and you can create a new reality for yourself, and you can show up as this next, more advanced version of yourself. But if you're going through a hard time, sometimes things are hard because it's just the process, and it's just, it could be the purification process, it could be the internalizing of the lesson, it could be things on 3D reality. We can move very quickly in spirit realm, but on 3D reality, it's a little slower for us to move forward with some of these things. They take time to integrate. The lessons take time to integrate. There is physical reality that we do need. It's very dense. We have to move through it in this way. So just remember, when you're going through a hard time, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It doesn't mean you can lose your healing. It doesn't mean you can go backwards. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. The ego loves all that stuff, right? Because it's like, I mastered this. I never have to do it again. But the name of the game on earth is maintenance and growth. And, if you think in 3 years from now, you're probably going to be working through stuff that you have maybe even no idea you need to work through it, or that's going to come up or is going to challenge you. So just having some compassion for yourself, having some kindness for yourself, just recognizing that these things that we go through on earth, like, it is for our soul expansion. And we're not saying that to minimize any pain or trauma or anything you go through, but when you're done with something, when you've learned the lesson from it, to release it, you are going to have to release it on some level to be able to move forward and be like, okay, I'm ready to now move into this and this layer of my life. And so choosing to not beat yourself up, choosing to not be mean to yourself about it, can be very, very freeing and very, very helpful. Okay, that's it. I hope this serves you. Thank you so much for being here with me. If you ever want any more information about me, all that is linked below. And just remember, if you're going through a hard time, that means you're growing and changing in some way, shape, or form. Hang in there. Keep going. The only way out is through. You can do it. And we're all in it. It's just part of life. Okay. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.